Thank you. Thank you for all you do. I guess a lot of us have not caught up with spring today. Hello, everybody. Please be seated. My name is Samia Assad. I'm president of the Coordinating Council for the Albuquerque Center for Peace and Justice, and I welcome you to the 35th anniversary of the Albuquerque Center for Peace and Justice Gala. Please, you're all welcome. Tonight is a special evening. We're going to honor one of the legends in this community. I probably come to tears talking about Sally Alice Thompson, but that's later in the program. And today I just want to talk to you about the Albuquerque Center for Peace and Justice. It was founded in 1983 to provide space where groups working on peace and justice issues could support and network with one another. In 1984, the words "and justice" were added to our name to better represent the greater mission and goals of our work. The initial focus of the center was disarmament and peaceful economic conversion, work that reflects our location in a state that has been controlled economically by the war industry since the 1940s. Our work broadened in the mid-'80s to include Central America solidarity movements, including the Sanctuary Movement and the Peace Education Project, which provided local educators with resources, curricula, and training on issues such as multiculturalism, rethinking Columbus, and nonviolence. Throughout the 80s and into the early 90s, the center published Center News and a newspaper of local actions, campaigns, and commentary on peace and justice issues. We move up to 2003, when after the Iraqi war, we were very active on that forefront, and every other single issue since then. We have been quite busy and quite active and at the forefront of every battle there is in this town. And yet, we are hoping that even though we have our 35th year, I'm hoping for the 100th year to come ahead of us. We have a lot of plans for the Peace Center. I joined the Peace Center in 2014. It's been a home for me. I've found, as a Palestinian American, as a Muslim, it's been a great place to advocate for myself as well as community. It has opened up my eyes to so much, and such a beautiful community that has been so committed to peace and justice. It's really beautiful to see, and I bear witness to the steadfastness of so many of the activists that have been there for 30 years, for over 30 years. So I commend all of you and thank you for that leadership and the commitment to peace and justice. As we move forward, like I said, I want to see the Peace and Justice Center go into racial healing, truth and reconciliation, amongst our nonviolence training, and all other issues that we address, immigrant rights, peace and justice, nuclear disarmament, you name it. There's so much to address, police violence. There's just an abundance that challenges us here in Albuquerque. But I believe in the community that supports the center, and I hope that you can continue with your generosity to support the center to exist for decades to come, because the battle is very real. It's very real. And we're a small center. I always say it's like the Peace Center is like this little red engine that could. We survive, we do so much, and people are shocked when they hear about our budget. They think we have like six-figure budgets, and when we say no, it's a lot of volunteers, and now we have 2 full-time staff. We're very happy, or actually 1 full-time and 1 almost full-time, hoping to be. So I think the center is going to even grow much more into the needs of the community at large, and I'm really happy to be in this space for this. Well, thank you for always supporting and continue to be members of the center, and let's hope it grows to be what we, this the power that it is right now, but even more powerful because it's such a centric hub to the state of New Mexico, and one of the few in the country. So many people around the country tell me, how do you guys do it at the Peace Center? And I say it's got a lot of heart, and a lot of conviction, and that's what makes us special. Tonight we have many guests, 2 guests that are going to be joining us, and a few of the community members, and a play that will be put on. But we will begin with our first guest, Colonel Mary Ann Wright. She is a retired United States. She deserves a bigger clap than that. Come on, guys. She's a pretty badass activist. Colonel Mary Ann Wright is a retired United States Army colonel and retired U.S. State Department official known for her outspoken opposition to the Iraqi war. She received the State Department Award for Heroism in 1997 after helping to evacuate several thousand people during the Civil War in Sierra Leone. She is most noted for having been one of the 3 State Department officials to publicly resign in direct protest of the 2003 invasion of Iraq. That's impressive. Wright was also a passenger on the Challenger 1, which along with the Mavi Marmara, was part of the Gaza flotilla. And yesterday I just found out she's been banned not 10, 20 years from going to Israel. She's just come back from Iran. I am extremely anxious to hear from Ann, so please help me welcome Colonel Ann Wright.
Well, thank you so much, Samia and Martha and all the Albuquerque Peace and Justice Center. It's a real pleasure to be here today on a momentous day. I mean, 35 years that you all have been having that wonderful Peace and Justice Center in Albuquerque. Let's give it a big round of applause for... Yeah. And how many of you all are volunteers with the Peace and Justice Center? Or volunteers with some other of the, 50 or 60 organizations that use the facilities of the center? Well, it's a real hub for community work here in Albuquerque, and 35 years is a remarkable time. You know, all over America, there are centers just like yours, and many times we don't hear about them. We hear in the communities where we are, but we don't remember that there's one in Honolulu, Hawaii, where I live. There's one in Fayetteville, Arkansas. There's one in Oklahoma City. I mean, the numbers of peace and justice centers that we have around the country should give us hope that there are lots of people just like you, just like me, that are challenging the policies of administrations. Not just the Trump administration that we're doing now, but we've challenged policies of the Obama administration. We've challenged policies of the Bush administration. Those are just the 3 that I've challenged. Before that, while you all were challenging all the other 8 administrations that I worked under, I wasn't challenging them like you all were. So I admire you all very, very much for your persistence, your history of standing up for truth against a never-ending onslaught of government lies. Yeah, and that's hard to say, isn't it? I mean, that our government lies? Well, you all know it better than I do. Well, no, I think we all know it together. We have to be very vigilant about what our government's doing, and we have to challenge every little aspect of it. And one of the people that we are honoring tonight not only has 35 years of service, but if you look at Sally Alice, yay! If you look at Sally Alice Thompson, Sally Alice, please stand up right here on the front row. She's going to get so tired of standing up today, but 95 years of service to us. Yay!
Sally Alice looks sexy tonight.
That's right.
She looks pretty good tonight.
Yeah, she's looking great tonight. Woo. Well, I wanted to start out my talk first about Sally Alice, and I know there's going to be a lot of other things that will be spoken about her, but some of the things that I got to know Sally Alice through Veterans for Peace, and she has a Veterans for Peace shirt on there right now, as I have proudly here. I stumbled into Sally Alice, well, I guess the first time I ever met Sally Alice was at Camp Casey in Texas. You know, that was, gosh, 2005, that's almost 14 years ago that we were challenging the Bush administration on the war on Iraq. And then the thing I most remember about Sally Alice, though, is stumbling into her, although actually she's the one that stumbled. At our Veterans for Peace conference in Seattle, she and I were walking along to one of the big things that, I think it was Aaron Watada, the war resistor, was giving a talk, and Sally Alice and I and Don were walking along the sidewalk, and there was some construction, and Sally Alice took a nosedive. You remember that? And she probably came home with her arm in a sling. Well, it didn't stop her. She was ready to go the next day to keep after all of this. And as we know of things that, of places that people go, this picture was taken of Sally Alice at School of the Americas Watch in Tucson 2 years ago. She's been a great supporter of School of the Americas Watch when it was in Fort Benning, Georgia, challenging the U.S. military's programs in Central and South America, something we should be watching right now, where we have the Colombian and Venezuelan militaries now that the U.S. has been involved in over the years. We have, let's see, while we're talking about Vets for Peace, I just wanted to mention that Vets for Peace here in Albuquerque next weekend will be having a presentation for the Vets for Peace chapter president, Charles Powell. So be sure to put that on your agenda. I thought this was a great picture of Sally Alice and Charles there. And one of the things that I did not really focus on too much until reading her bio just recently were all of the marches that she's been on. The incredible marches, and this great peace march that happened in 1986, almost 8 months, where they walked from Los Angeles to Washington, D.C., 3,325 miles, and over 400 marchers that went that way. And she'll tell you some stories about 1,500 of them that got as far as Barstow, California, and then the organizer of the march said, "I'm sorry, we've run out of money. We don't have anything, we don't have the transportation, we don't have the logistics." She was telling me this last night. And 400 of them said, "We don't care, we're going anyway." And so they did. And so for the next 8 months, they traveled across America having community events all over America, talking about the need to watch out for these nuclear weapons, the whole nuclear weapons program that we still have and has ginned up again. They were railing against. And as Sally Alice told me last night, she said on the trip, some young kid said, "You know, we're marching in America, but we ought to go to Russia. I bet there's some Russians that are kind of irritated about what their government's doing." Well, before I start about that, I did some digging around last night on the internet, and here is a photograph of Sally Alice in 1986 on that march. And then here is a photograph of Sally Alice 1 year later when she and 300 Americans went to Russia. They went to Russia and they had a march from Leningrad to Moscow. And there are some videos that are available, an hour-long video about that march. And I found this picture in that video watching all of these Americans that had gone all the way to Russia. Do you think we ought to have another march, considering what's going on? Yeah, I think we should, and I think Sally Alice will be right there in the front of all of us. So Sally Alice, we thank you so much for your concern, your leadership, your modeling for all of us of behaviors that we and generations should be following, that there's something bigger than us, that there are projects we need to be working on, and there are places we need to be going, and stories we need to be telling about what's going on in the world. And these marches, and going to Camp Casey, and I'll just mention another one right now. I've just returned from Iran. You talk about the hot spots of the world these days and the rhetoric that the Trump administration has had. We took a trip with Code Pink Women for Peace, great organization, organized a trip that we've just returned from this last Monday, 10 days in Iran. We had 28 people on this trip. We started out with 70, but because it is so difficult to get visas to go into Iran, but we had to change the dates because the visas weren't coming through. They weren't coming through, and then finally the visas came through, and it was in late February and then through the early part of March that we finally took the trip. This picture is taken in front of the Tehran Peace Museum, a peace museum in Iran. I mean, we wouldn't hear about that, would we, from our media? That just like the Russian people, they want peace. Well, the Iranian people, I'll tell you, they want peace. They've had a lot of war. In fact, the 1980 to 1988 war with Iraq, or attacked by Iraq, where over 1 million Iranians were killed. And like most peace museums in the world, whether you go to one in Japan or this one in Iran, they're actually war museums. They're war museums. At the end of it says, we shouldn't do this again, we ought to have peace. And so they put peace up there. In this peace museum, though, we saw the effects of the U.S.-sponsored chemical weapons that were given to the Iraqi military and used on Iranians. It was a very, very poignant time to go in there and hear from veterans. And this Veterans for Peace shirt, it goes a long way when you're in places like that there are veterans that have endured things. Our veterans of our latter-day wars, so to speak, on Afghanistan and Iraq, but my generation of women and men that went to Vietnam, I didn't. I was in the military during that time, but I did not go to Vietnam. When you look at the results, not only the dead and wounded, but the psychologically wounded. And it doesn't matter what country you talk about, it's all the same. You know, the deaths, the wounding, the psychological problems for the rest of their lives. And that's what you find in Iran. And some of the volunteers in the Iran Peace Museum were veterans of that war that were victims of the chemical attacks. In fact, one fellow that was telling us about the displays of chemical things were, he couldn't catch his breath and was coughing and coughing and coughing because of the damage that had been done to his lungs. While we were in Iran, we also had some opportunities to speak with government officials, and a remarkable event occurred. We were able to have a meeting with the foreign minister of Iran, Zarif. He's the one that negotiated with John Kerry the nuclear deal, the nuclear agreement with Iran that the Trump administration threw away. But the foreign minister cleared his schedule. Actually, we found out later on that afternoon the reason it was cleared was that he was going to resign that same day, and he did. But before he had resigned, he had spoken to us for over an hour and a half, kind of spilling his guts. We were wondering, why is he talking so much? What about the history, all of this stuff? Why does he have so much time for our 28-person delegation? And then it turned out he had told us the day before. We'd run into him at the University of Tehran and asked if we could bring our delegation by and just meet briefly with him. And he said, well, it looks like my trip to Geneva I'm going to cancel, so I may be available tomorrow. Well, little did we know. He had other things that he was thinking about. The reason he was resigning was because of what the U.S. was doing, that indeed the sanctions that the U.S. has continued to pile onto Iran. I mean, the first sanctions started 40 years ago after the overthrow of the Shah, the imprisonment of 53 U.S. Diplomats for 444 days. The Carter administration put sanctions on them, then the Reagan administration, and then the Bush administration, and then the Clinton administration, then the Bush administration, then the Obama administration, and now the Trump administration. So for the last 40 years, they've lived under sanctions. Zarif was saying, the people of Iran expected more. We signed an agreement, the most extensive nuclear agreement ever in the history of the world, where we gave up thousands of centrifuges and got nothing in return for it. And the people of Iran are angry about that you, the United States, have continued to pile on sanctions that are harmful to the ordinary citizen. I mean, you have people who are saying, we can no longer, the real, the money has devaluated by triple. Food is expensive, everything is expensive. Weddings are being postponed, marriages postponed because families don't have money for these things. Kids can't get a scholarship internationally because, well, for the United States, we have a ban, a Muslim ban on 7 countries. So the foreign minister really poured his heart out, and we were writing articles about this remarkable time that we had with the foreign minister. And in fact, you can listen to the audio of it, and we now have a written transcript. And if you go to Resistance, what's Margaret Flowers and Kevin Zeis's resistance.org. Anyway, it's all on that, and it'll be up on the Code Pink website. But one of the things that we talked about with the foreign minister, and we made an apology to the foreign minister. We made an apology not only for these sanctions that our country has put on, and the fact that this administration has dumped the nuclear agreement, but we also went back in history. We went back in history to 1988 when a U.S. military ship, the USS Vincennes, shot down an Iranian airliner with 290 people on board. Just shot it down. You know, it's kind of reminiscent. It reminds people in Iran, it's the same memory they have as we have of 9/11, where so many people were killed in 9/11, and that's one of the things they remember. The U.S. government shot down one of their civilian airliners on an authorized civilian flight path out of Iran, still in Iranian airspace, going over to Dubai and then taking pilgrims on to Saudi Arabia. So we decided we would take a gift, and one of our delegates, Barbara Briggs-Letson out of San Francisco, is a bookmaker, and she made a book, and you can see it in her hands here, a book that had some poems and an apology from the people of the United States to the people of Iran, and it had in Farsi all of the names of the 290 people that were killed. Yeah. So we first presented it to the foreign minister, and he got choked up. And then we presented it to the director of the Tehran Peace Museum. And as you see here, well, you don't see the lower part of him. He has no legs. His legs were blown off in that war with Iran, with Iraq. So the trip to Iran was very important. It's important we go to the places where our government does not want us to go. And in fact, when Medea Benjamin and I, we were the 2 trip leaders, along with Jody Evans, a co-founder of Code Pink. When Medea and I got back into Washington in Dulles Airport, we immediately were told to go to secondary screening, which we kind of suspected they'd probably put us in that. And then not only were the Border and Customs people talking to us, but then they said, and we have some FBI agents that want to talk to you. Yeah, and so these trips to places that people don't want us to go, whether it's Afghanistan or Pakistan or Iraq or Syria or Lebanon or Yemen or Gaza or where else, Somalia, these are places that we have to go. We have to go see what's going on. We have to go to Venezuela to see what's going on. And in fact, today we had a delegation of peace activists that are in Venezuela. And I don't know if you've seen what I don't know if you've seen the news today, but the New York Times is saying that the media totally mischaracterized what happened last weekend with the burning of one of the trucks that had humanitarian assistance on it. For the whole week we've been told that it was the Maduro government that burned that. And now the New York Times says the videos of that show that it was an opposition person that threw a Molotov cocktail in there. So as we all know, there's a lot to it. We wish the people of Venezuela good. I mean, it's a tough situation that's going on right now, and there are a lot of people that are hurting. there are over 3.5 million Venezuelans who have left their country. And that's out of a country of 30 million people. So there's got to be dialogue, and it can't be the United States forcing a solution, our solution, U.S. solution, on the people of Venezuela. So we wish that delegation luck. Well, one other place that I'd like to mention as we talk about where Sally Alice has been, and we talk about what things that we as a Albuquerque Peace and Justice Center ought to be looking at. Another one of the hot spots of the world is, of course, the Korean Peninsula. And just last week we had the second summit with President Trump and Chairman Kim Jong-un meeting, and as you can tell from the expressions on their face here, when I saw that, we were in Iran when all this was going on, and trying to get television footage of it all, and this kind of, well, it doesn't say it all, quite honestly. It says what the U.S. press wants it to say. Behind the scenes, I think there's a lot more going on, and the rhetoric that comes out of John Bolton and of Mike Pompeo, I don't think is the rhetoric that President Trump really wants. There is one thing, and this will be the only thing that I will give President Trump credit for, is that he is meeting with Kim Jong-un. That is a very good thing. And I wish he would meet with the Iranian leadership too. It is important that we use dialogue, that they develop a personal relationship. And some of the things that President Trump says, it's kind of, well, kind of over the top in a way, but at least he's talking, and he says, I think this guy's a good guy, or as good as one can get. This Kim Jong-un, he grew up mostly in Switzerland. That's where he went to school. He wasn't even chosen by his father until the father was virtually on his deathbed, passing over an older brother who unfortunately was killed in Malaysia or Thailand, one of the two. Well, the bottom line is this is a very young man. It's a man who says he wants economic development for his country. And in fact, if you read his New Year's Day speech for every year that he has been in power, it doesn't talk about nuclear weapons. It talks about what they want to do with the country, to bring the country up into an economic, a reasonable economic country. The nuclear weapons, he says, are for our defense because we have enemies. We have enemies right on our border, and that's the United States of America sitting in the country of South Korea. We have to give good credit to the new president of South Korea, who is really the spark plug that has initiated all of this dialogue about North Korea. I'm very interested in it because, I'm interested in it because I was in North Korea 3.5 years ago. I went to North Korea with a group of women. It's called Women Cross the DMZ. We had 30 women from 15 countries, 2 Nobel Peace Laureates, and the nominal head of the delegation was Gloria Steinem. She's the one that got publicity for us. And she's very sympathetic to this. The pictures that you see there, the one on the left is from Seoul, South Korea last summer when we had dialogue with South Korean parliamentarians and a peace march, the third peace march that we've had in South Korea for peace on the Korean Peninsula. And the one on the right is from 2015 when we marched with 5,000 North Korean women in the streets of Pyongyang. And the massive statue that you see there in the slide is of 2 women holding hands, one from North Korea and one from South Korea, for peace and reunification of their country. It wasn't until the U.S. And Russia split the Korean Peninsula apart after World War II. It was a unified country, although from 1917 on, the Japanese had occupied it, but it was one country. And people want it to be, some people want it to be one country, other people want it to at least 2 countries, but at peace. And that's what we're after right now, peace on the Korean Peninsula. And the women's-led initiatives, not only us going to North Korea, and we would have been there again and again had not the Trump administration put a travel ban on that you have to get from the Trump administration a special passport. in order to go to North Korea. And they are not issuing it. They've issued very, very few of them. Only a few to the humanitarian organizations that have had programs there. Do you happen to know any American groups that maybe have had programs, aid programs in North Korea? How about the Quakers? They've had an agricultural program there for 35 years, as have the Mennonites. It's not an isolated country except to us. It has diplomatic relations with many, many countries of the world, but not with us. It is isolated in its own way, but it is not as isolated as our media says it should be. So the issue of where we go, what we do, what we use the resources that we have through organizations like the Albuquerque Peace and Justice Center. I mean, like, how many of you all would like to organize as a peace center to go someplace? Yeah, where you want to go? You want to go to Iran? Okay, well, we think we'll probably be organizing another trip to Iran in the fall. So keep in touch with Code Pink Women for Peace on that one. How many of you would like to go to North Korea? A few hands are going up. Well, keep in touch in terms of if we can get the Trump administration to back off these the special validation passport, we definitely want to take people to North Korea. You know, there are all sorts of tourists that are in North Korea, just not American tourists. From Beijing, you can get a beer tour of North Korea. How about that? Every one of the major the hotels where internationals can stay, the North Koreans have brought in Czech and Polish brewmasters, and they have created microbreweries in the basement of those hotels. Yeah, and so people come up for a 3-day trip from Beijing, and as long as you don't start doing stuff like ripping posters off a wall that Otto Warmbier did, and tragically, I mean, that's horrible what happened to that kid, but you have to be on your P's and Q's there. You have to watch your step there, as you have to watch your step in Iran when you go on these trips. So I want to just finish up with one slide that I'd mentioned previously, the crisis in Venezuela, that we do have people that are going down there. How many of you all have been active in Central American issues over the years? Yeah, I would think so, whether it was going down in caravans into Guatemala and Nicaragua during the 1980s, going to Cuba. How many of you all have been to Cuba on the brigades? Yeah. Well, Venezuela is another place that we need to be sending more and more people, as this delegation that we have right now that's there. And then I want to just finally end with a compliment to you all. The border crisis, the national emergency that the president has named it, well, it is an emergency in a way, and you all are people who are helping out with that. The emergency is that we have human beings that are coming to our country seeking safety, and when they are released finally from these massive detention facilities where no telling how many tens of thousands of people are languishing right now, when they finally get on the bus, when they get on the bus in El Paso and that bus finally arrives in Albuquerque, and Monique was telling me just a few minutes ago that there's an alert out now that maybe 300 people will be arriving here in Albuquerque in the next couple of days. That you all help. You help find food, you find clothing, you find a place for people to stay, you get bus tickets, and you help them on their way to their sponsors. So that's the way America is. I mean, that's the goodness of the heart of the people of America, where we help people that are coming in. Right now, less than 35,000 visas are being given, refugee visas are being given. Normally, the United States has over 250. Oh, that means I'm supposed to be stopping soon. We have such a minuscule number of visas that are being issued to refugees worldwide now that these people that are now coming out of the detention facilities, we appreciate so much what you all that live down on the southern border of the United States, what you're doing to help other human beings. You know, there's a great saying, stay human, and you all are doing that exactly. And to the Albuquerque Peace and Justice Center and to Sally Alice Thompson, I want to say thank you all for your decades of service. Thank you. Thank you.